Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in our chats with Emily as we're calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson in the Johnson edition. We turn now to poem 169 in Ebon Box, When Years Have Flown. This whole question of the black box and what it is that Emily does, not only in this poem, but in a number of poems about trying to reclaim memories or live through or beyond memories. I think it's important. In many ways, this is an important poem because it's Emily's earliest poem about a letter. And letter writing was for Emily foundational. I mean, if you guys are really going to get serious about your study of Emily Dickinson, you need to read as many of the letters as we have. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of them that were destroyed or lost or haven't yet been found that we would love to still have. Our assumptions here now are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you've already been exposed to our set of introductory comments. I'm hopeful that you've already been working with us with the preceding 168 poems. We just finished with If the Foolish Call Them Flowers. Now, this is a poem on the power of memory, a poem on the passage of time, and I would argue the power of perhaps. Let's enjoy it. In Ebon Box, when years have flown to reverentially peer, wiping away the velvet dust summers have sprinkled there, to hold a letter to the light, grown tawny now with time, to con the fabled syllables that quickened us like wine, perhaps a flower's shriveled cheek among its stores to find, plucked far away some warning by gallant mouldering hand, a curl perhaps from foreheads our constancy forgot, perhaps an antique trinket in vanished fashions set, and then to lay them quiet back and go about its care as if the little Ebon Box were none of our affair. Now, I find this an interesting insight into the way in which Emily deals with memories that maybe cause her some kind of pain. We'll begin with the black box. When years have flown, notice we go from flown to fabled to shriveled to vanished. When years have flown to reverentially peer, you'll remember this reverentially from poem 119. Wiping away the velvet dust. In other words, this is the box that holds a letter and some trinkets that hasn't been touched for a long time. Think about the power of this imagery from a writer who never actually publishes her stuff, and after her death, her lines are then discovered as almost hidden in a box. Wiping away the velvet dust, her adjectives are brilliant here, the velvet dust summers have sprinkled there. In other words, I haven't opened this box for a long time. And then to hold a letter, notice this construction of two. It's again a lot of fun. We've seen this in earlier poems, right? To hold a letter to the light, grown tawny now with time. In other words, this is a letter that she saved. She was going to come back to it, and now she has. And to con the fabled syllables that quickened us like wine. Notice it's the us word, right? And of course, this idea of being intoxicated quickened us like wine with the exclamation points at the end of each one of these thoughts. And then she goes to perhaps. And as we've said to you, Emily loves this word. I think it's one of the central words of Emily's poetry. And when we get finally to poem 696, we will enjoy that phrase that we've quoted so regularly about Emily, acres of perhaps. Perhaps a flower's, notice capitalized, shriveled cheek. It's beautiful to go from faded to shriveled. Shriveled cheek among its stores to find, plucked far away. And this is fascinating because several of the poems that Emily writes, she sends with a flower, which if saved is obviously going to shrivel. Among its stores to find, plucked far away, some morning by gallant mouldering hand. In other words, somebody had to pick that flower, right? And then we're back to another perhaps. A curl, perhaps, from foreheads our constancy forgot. In other words, maybe there's a little bit of a lock of hair, for example. We know that Emily played this game as well once or twice in sending stuff. Perhaps, a third one, an antique trinket. Now we're going to come back to this with trinket ideas in poem 687. In vanished fashions sat. And then, after all of that, so you pull it all out, you pull out the black box, the Ebon Box, you pull out all of your stuff, you look at the letter, the tawny letter, and then to lay them quiet back. So you repack the box. You get a sense this has been done before, but it was a while ago because obviously we have velvet dust on the box. And then to lay them back, quiet back, and go about its care. Put the box back where it came from. As if the little Ebon Box were none of our affair. And in some ways, This takes us back to poem 165, yes? The Wounded Deer, where at times you got to get past, right, the past. And I think that's the point of this poem at 2a. We at times have to learn to live past pain or suffering, right? At 2a, I love the repetition, the to and the perhaps. At 3a, well, we mentioned it already in poem 696, her acres of perhaps. I like to think about Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We've given full lectures on all the poems at Talks with Walt before we started this series. You'll remember their comments about his Goodbye My Fancy poems and even the final poem, Goodbye My Fancy. The way in which Whitman was in some ways playing the very game that Emily's playing with here now, of pulling out the old memories and looking at them and then putting them away and moving on as if somehow you can move beyond those memories to imagine yourself not even looking at them. At 3b, to own a poem like this, what was a time when you had to live past your past as if it were for you none of your affair, to use the language of the poem? You had to move on. I think Emily is giving us some instruction here about ways to do that. Thank you.